What's the story, Morning Glory? What is the word, Hummingbird? Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and for joining me for this review of Married to Medicine Season 9 Reunion Part 3. Hallelujah, we have made it to the very end of Season 9 and let's get into it. So it starts off with Andy talking with just the men. And the conversation that they were on was Karen and Anila doing the Halloween prank on Eugene and Toya. And Kieran, his excuse is that if they made fun of the fact that Eugene and Toya move around a lot, then it would not seem as serious. The topic of them moving would not carry so much weight. So him and Anila dressing up like movers and showing up in a U-Haul truck and all of that, that was just them trying to lighten the mood around the whole topic of Eugene and Toya constantly moving. And Eugene was like, no, I didn't see it that way. He was, really, really hurt by it all. Eugene's real problem is Toya. And anything else surrounding that, he's going to take his anger out on that, like the way he took his anger out on Karen and Anila, the way he took his anger out on Quad later on. But his real issue is Toya, but he's not going to address Toya because either he's going to stand by his wife no matter what she does, no matter what she says, he's going to stand by his wife, or he's too worried about her possibly getting upset with him, possibly leaving him or something. So I think his real issue is Toya because he shows a lot of anger to things that you would think that he would not have that much anger for. So when he was talking about how what Karen and Anila did was so wrong and it was so hurtful and it hurt his feelings and it was just the worst thing that anybody could do to another person, Curtis checks Eugene and says, well, what about all the jokes that you made about me when I was at my lowest and I was going through infidelity issues with Jackie? So at first Eugene tries to kind of laugh it off a little bit, and then Curtis was like, no, I was really hurt with the things that you said. And Curtis said that if you compare the two, you joking about my issues with infidelity and issues with my marriage and Karen joking about you moving, you can't even compare the two. One is a whole lot more serious than the other. That finally shut Eugene up. And I was like, go ahead, Curtis. Then they talk about Toya's loneliness. And during C19, Eugene was out saving the world. He was a doctor in an emergency situation, doing what he was, trained to do, what he's supposed to do. And, Toya was complaining about I didn't know she was specifically talking about that time period, when everything started happening and, we all had to quarantine and all of that. I didn't know she was talking about that particular time frame. I thought she was talking about moments after that she felt this loneliness. But she was referring to, I guess, according to Eugene, she was referring to specifically around the time when things are really hectic in the world and nobody knew what was going on and people were losing their lives, etc. So Eugene says that during that time when Toya was feeling lonely, it was when he was working a whole lot of hours. He was distancing himself or removing himself from his family because he was dealing with a lot at work, watching people lose their lives over this illness that we did not know that much about. And it was extremely stressful. I can only imagine if it was stressful for those of us on the outside, I can only imagine what those who were directly involved with it were going through. So he felt really bad about that. He had a lot of guilt about that. And I'm thinking to myself, if I was Toya, I would not have guilted my husband during that time. I would not make him feel any type of guilt for not really being around or not being present because he was going through a lot himself. He was going through you can't even put into words what these doctors were going through at that time. And because they were in fear of them losing their own lives, watching a whole bunch of people lose their lives, worried about bringing this disease home to their families. And Toya is complaining about being lonely because your husband's at work, saving the world, being a hero. You're going to complain about being lonely. I would not have put that on my husband's shoulders for him to worry about and for him to deal with. Like, okay, when I'm out working, doing what I'm supposed to be doing, providing, saving lives, you're at home complaining about being lonely. I just wouldn't have done it. And I just think that it's very narcissistic. That is very narcissistic of Toya, very selfish of Toya. Your husband's going through a really crazy, crazy, crazy stressful moment. And here you are complaining about, I was just so lonely. And I don't want to really, and I just did, but I really don't want to poke fun at what she was going through. But when you put it in perspective, really, girl, you're going to complain about that with what your husband was going through and what he was dealing with. It's not like he's out with the boys. Okay, there are some wives who are truly lonely. Their husbands can be in the house with them and they feel lonely because they have husbands who don't engage, husbands who don't communicate with them, and for no reason. You know, their husbands, they're not saving the world, they're not saving lives, for absolutely no reason at all. They're not going through anything crazy. They're just not interested anymore. They've detached themselves from their spouse. There's wives out there who are really going through loneliness in marriages. What you were going through, I mean, you have to put it in perspective, Toya, and see why your husband was not present. Then they talk about Scott. Okay, Scott and his shenanigans. He already admitted last year about, you know, going into people's DMs and responding to people's DMs, and he knew that that was wrong. He shouldn't have done that. I don't know why he's such a such a goofball, not knowing that that was wrong. Like, anyways, and during the intermission, Scott performed for us. You know, he sang us his little diddly, and it made me think of Heavenly, because on Heavenly's YouTube channel, and I was looking at Heavenly whenever the camera was on the women and I could see Heavenly's face, I was looking at Heavenly because on her YouTube channel, she talks about how, because on her YouTube channel, she was giving us little tidbits of what was going to be coming up in the reunion before any of the reunion aired. When we were still deep in the season, she was giving little teasers about what we were going to be seeing in the reunion. And one of the things that she talked about was Scott singing this song to Contessa. And she made it a point to say that her husband, Dr. Damon, has written beautiful love songs about her, for her, to her, because they used to own a music studio. And so he was really into music back in the day. And she talks about how, you know, Dr. Damon, he wrote love songs for me too, and they were much better than Scott's rap. And I was looking at Heavenly's face, and Heavenly looked kind of sour when Scott was rapping about Contessa, his love for Contessa. So then they had all the couples together on stage, and the question was, which husband is on the shortest or longest leash? And Curtis, obviously, he's got the longest leash because Jackie's gone all the time. Jackie's busy. Jackie's booked and busy. She's working. She's, you know, doing her thing, creating an empire, a medical empire. And so Curtis has all the time in the world to do whatever the hell he wants to do. And that's how he gets in trouble. He has all the time in the world to do whatever the hell he wants to do because his wife is not really present all the time. Then they talked about Toya and the horrible things that she said about Eugene and whether or not she was actually dissing her husband. Yes, Toya was dissing her husband. When she said what she said about, she was disappointed that it wouldn't get any bigger after you get married or whatever the hell, whatever ignorant, asinine comment that she made, she was referring to Eugene. You know, she likes to make everybody cackle and laugh and ha ha at the expense of her husband. She thinks it's hilarious when she talks about Eugene. And because Eugene never says anything, Eugene never checks her. That's why she keeps on doing it. And she sees nothing wrong with her doing it. So she says, I really wasn't, when she made that comment about, oh, I was surprised after getting married that it didn't get any bigger. She says in the reunion that I wasn't even talking about Eugene. I was just talking in general. Girl, you were talking about Eugene. You were talking about Eugene Harris, whatever the hell his last name is. You were talking about your husband, the father of your kids. That's who you were referring to, specifically Eugene. So she says that when she saw the clip, I guess after the season wrapped, and she saw that, she felt really bad. Like, why would you feel bad if it had nothing to do with Eugene? And she had to go and talk to her husband and warn him of what he was going to be seeing and apologize to him for what she had said. For what, Toya, if it had nothing to do with Eugene and you were just talking in generalities? You were specifically talking about your own damn husband, and he probably said that, and he's probably still didn't check you. And he was just like, oh, well. Then they talked about how, how and all the things that Toya has said that would embarrass Eugene. And Eugene says that he's not embarrassed. He says he never feels embarrassed because he knows who he is. He's confident in himself as a man. So he's never embarrassed by the things that Toya says. And it never once crossed your mind, Eugene, that no other wife on that stage says derogatory things about their husbands. It's just your wife. And if you're confident in who you are, girl, if you're confident in who you are, fine. If the things that Toya says don't bother you, fine. But why can't you have a conversation with your wife to find out, number one, why do you feel this need to always make fun of me? And number two, don't you ever think about how it can make me feel or how it makes our marriage look when you're out there constantly poking fun at me? You need to have that conversation with her. Even though you're confident, you're not lacking anywhere. You have more than enough to go around. You should still have a conversation with your wife and ask her, why does she think it's so hilarious to make fun of the man who is working so hard to provide for her? Quad then begins to highlight, the horrible things that Toya has said about Eugene. And as she gets started, by saying, Quad was basically saying, I don't understand why Toya would say the things that she says about her husband, because her husband really loves her. He takes really good care of her. So I don't understand where all this is coming from. Eugene interrupts her and says to Quad, the things that you said, Quad, about me were a whole lot worse than anything that Toya has ever said. Eugene, you're a simp and you're a fool. Do you hear yourself? It doesn't matter what anybody else has to say about you, but if your spouse, the one that's supposed to love you and take care of you and honor you and respect you, if your spouse says the slightest thing to you, that can cut a whole lot deeper than what anybody else could possibly say. For example, if my husband looks at me and says, looks like you're kind of putting on some weight there. You want to do something about that? That would hurt me 1,000 times worse than anybody on the outside calling me a bleached whale, saying that I got to be on my 600-pound life, calling me, whatever. Nothing that anybody else can possibly say will ever cut as deep as the slightest thing that my husband would say to me. Okay, because that's the person who's supposed to honor you, respect you. And of course they can, express whatever concerns they want to express, but you got to put it in a certain way. So him saying that anything that Quad said was a whole lot worse than anything that Toya, I don't see how anything that Quad has said could possibly be worse than your own wife talking about you, talking about your manhood, how she's not satisfied by you. I don't understand how anything, Quad doesn't live in your home and she doesn't sleep in your bed. So I don't see how anything Quad says would have any effect on you, period. But all the things that Toya says has no bearing. And if you're so confident in who you are as a man, Eugene, then why would anything Quad say bother you? Because you're saying that nothing that Toya says bothers you because you're confident in who you are. So why do the things that Quad say bother you? You lose your confidence when Quad opens her mouth? So Quad, her excuse was she was just responding to all the stuff that they said about her online or whatever. She was just defending herself. And then they start going back and forth. And then that's when Eugene says to Quad, what's your problem with this? And she says nothing. And then he says, then just leave us alone. And he was just going toe to toe with Quad. And, Toya jumps in and she tells Quad, I didn't like how you were addressing my husband online. I told you if you have any issues, you need to come to me and talk to me about it. Y'all, I'm not part of that philosophy of men can only talk to men and women can only talk to women. I am not a part of that damn philosophy. Whoever's bringing the smoke can get the smoke from whichever way. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If a man is bringing the smoke to a woman, she can respond. If a woman is bringing that smoke to a man, he can respond. I am not in this thing. Oh, I can't talk. Even though you're attacking me, I can't say anything to you until my husband. Are you crazy? No. And that's, to me, it's just crazy to me how these women who are educated, accomplished, professionals have this whole mentality of men can only speak to men and women can only speak to women. Scott jumps in and he tells Heavenly that what she had said, the things that she had said about him, had really hurt him. I.e., the comments that she made about him being emotionally abusive to Contessa, emotionally and verbally abusive to Contessa. Let's talk about that. Now, Heavenly had said, Heavenly has said a lot of problematic things on her YouTube channel about everybody. And of course, it was different with Contessa because they were real friends. Now, Heavenly should not have said that on her YouTube channel, that Scott was emotionally and verbally abusive. She should have addressed that directly to Contessa. She should not have said that on YouTube, because what was it helping for her to say it on YouTube? It wasn't helping anything. So Scott addresses that. He said it really hurt him when she said that. Heavenly apologized to him. And Heavenly starts talking about how they're both Scorpios, and so she understands where he's coming from. And then she says something about how she understands Scott a whole lot better than she understands Contessa. Then the question comes up, what advice can the men give to the women about resolving issues? So Dr. Damon began to speak, and he started talking about how it's important to communicate one-on-one. I guess away from the peanut gallery. If you have a problem with someone, go directly to that person and address your issues with that person. So then Quad asks Dr. Damon, so in my situation, when I try to talk to this person, and she was referring to Heavenly, when I try to talk to this person one-on-one, at the moment, they would apologize and say that they would do better, but then nothing would change. They would go right back to the things that they were doing that hurt me. So how do I deal with that? So then Dr. Heavenly interrupts and says, don't speak to my man. Don't ask him anything. Me and you, we've already talked about it. I've already apologized. So the issue between us it's resolved. You don't have to talk to my husband. So Quad was still insisting on talking to Dr. Damon. And every time she tried to direct her statement to Dr. Damon, Heavenly would interrupt and say, don't talk to my man. Don't talk to my husband. Da, da, da. And I was like, this is the problem, thinking that archaically and that backwards. This is the problem with that, because you don't believe that men should talk to women and women can't talk to men, and women can't, because the opposite sexes can't speak to one another. You get all hot and bothered when your friend is trying to have a conversation with your husband. And I understand that Heavenly was worried about, she knew that it was about her, and I guess she was tired of the spotlight being put on her, and I guess she doesn't want her faults, her shenanigans, her issues, she doesn't want them to be something for Dr. Damon to address, because she's probably embarrassed. So she's probably embarrassed with having her husband, who's so respected, having him address her clownish behavior. So she wanted to shut Quad up. It was just bizarre to me. It was just so bizarre. Like, why can't you let your husband answer Quad's question? You make it seem you make it a whole lot worse. You make it seem as if either you don't want to hear what your husband has to say, or you're extremely embarrassed by your own actions and you don't want anyone talking about it. Whichever way it goes, it makes it look, you made it look a whole lot worse, Heavenly. You should have just let them have their little 30-second conversation. It would have been over with. And if you're so confident in your marriage and you're so confident in your man, then you wouldn't be worried about anything that he had to say, because whatever he's going to say is just going to uplift you. So why did you try to shut that down? So she looked absolutely crazy. So then Andy steps in and he was like, well, can I ask him the question? And Dr. Heavenly was like, no, you cannot address my husband. No. But anyways, the question was asked and Dr. Damon was finally able to respond. And his answer wasn't even bad. He completely stood by Heavenly's side. by saying that she's not the only one with the issue. We all have issues. We all have homework to do. And that was his answer. And that was the end of it. So he could have given that same exact answer to Quad, and it would have been over with in a few seconds without you having to embarrass yourself. So that was basically the end of the damn reunion. At the very end, when it came time for the final thoughts, Toya says it's going to be hard for her to trust these particular group of women. Then get off the show, Toya. If you can't trust anybody, just get off the show. She says that family is everything. So then you embarrass the father of your children. She says her family is very, very important to her. Her children are getting to be at that age where they can understand what's going on in the show. They're 10 and 12 years old. And so she was directing that comment to the other women, like, you know, my sons are watching y'all and they can comprehend stuff now. And it's like, okay, but they're really watching you, Toya. So if you know your kids are watching you, then why do you berate their father so damn much? This is the reason why your sons don't respect you in your home, because I remember there were scenes during the season where, you know, she would say something and I guess her voice would kind of get loud and her son would always direct his comment to her. Even though it was both her and Eugene talking, the son would say, God, why do you got to be so loud? And he was talking to his mother. Okay, your sons are watching, Toya, so show a little bit more respect to their father. Even if you don't respect Eugene as a husband, respect him as the father of your children. Toya and Quad are still on shaky grounds. Quad says that she feels vindicated being on the reunion, and then Toya turned that around into, like, I don't know what the hell she was trying to imply by that, but she kind of turned it around into something that it wasn't, so that Quad had to explain herself. You know, I finally was able to give my side of the story and proclaim once and for all that I don't sleep with married men. That's why I feel vindicated. Anila says that she wants to be good with Toya. Anila is one of those people, and I don't mind Anila. Okay, fine. Anila's fine. You know, she can come back. It doesn't matter to me. Anila's fine. But Anila is one of those people, like, she's very much on the immature side. Like, she never quite got out of that high school mentality or middle school mentality. So, Anila is the kind of person where she wants to be good with everybody, but it's not a genuine goodness, because I can definitely see how she'll be begging for your friendship, begging for forgiveness, and then you go ahead and you forgive her and you're back friends with her. But then as soon as someone pulls her away and wants to start talking about you with her, she's right there with it. She's right there with the mess. Again, that's how Anila is. It's like she can't help herself. Whoever she's with, whatever the moment is, she's going to blend into that. So if you want to make up with Toya and you want Toya to appreciate you and you appreciate her and y'all are friends again, she could be hanging out with Dr. Heavenly, and then Heavenly will start talking crap about Toya, and Anila's not going to defend Toya, even though they made up. She won't defend Toya. She's going to be, you know, engaging in the gossip, whether it's, ooh, tell me more, or adding in her own information to fuel the fire. That's how Anila strikes me. Heavenly and Contessa, they're also still on shaky grounds. Contessa said only time can tell with what's going to happen between her and Heavenly. And then the strippers came out and served everybody champagne, and that was the end of the show. So it was a good reunion. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed the reunion a whole lot more than I did the actual show. So yes, for anyone that has joined me throughout these reviews for Married to Medicine season 9, I really do appreciate it. We have come to the end of the road on season 9, and I can just only hope and pray that you'll join me again for season 10. Thank you so much. On your way out, please don't forget to rate the video, and if you like this content, go ahead and subscribe, and I will definitely talk to you later. Bye.